So working on old cars, at some point or other, you're gonna find yourself underneath the car, which is exactly where I am. You know, I spent the last 4 weeks working on this thing, hand sanding it, getting it ready to receive paint, and we're almost there, we're almost ready to go. But even prior to doing that, there is some work we have to do so it could receive the paint properly, because if we don't do these crucial steps, the paint will fail and all of our work will be ruined. We don't want that.
My name is Trooper Max, and I'm restoring a car that's been off the road since 1977. But I've never done this before. I've taken the time to do my research, and I'm building the car of my dreams, hoping to inspire others to do the same.
Alrighty, so I'm back here under the car. It's all sanded, ready for the next stage. And if this doesn't look very comfortable, that's because it isn't. Working under the car sucks, to say the very least. It took us like 4 weeks to sand the bottom of this thing. But now we're ready to go to the next stage, and that's getting it ready for epoxy, seam sealer, all that kind of stuff. So right now it is sanded and sealed with OSFO. However, before that, before I can move on to the next stage, the thing I gotta actually do is I need to break down any sort of welds and anything I have left. I had already done that for the most part, and then I put OSFO on it. However, there's a couple areas that I have fixed since then. I added a fuel access panel. The other side, the front there is a disaster. There's been so much repair work done. It's gonna take some work to make this look all good, but that's okay. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna use a blend of technology and tools to make that happen. But before we do that, what I wanna do is just kind of go around the car and break down any sort of welds, because there's a couple that are really sticking out and I wanna make it look good. So I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna do that right now. Alrighty, so getting underneath the car, you can see there's two types of welds we got going on here. So the first type of weld is a spot weld, and they're all along the sides here. Anytime two panels come together, sandwiched together, put together with a spot weld. And we've been cleaning those up for the most part, and they look pretty good. And there's still a couple areas we haven't hit. So back in the trunk drop off. The other type is this one right here, which is a butt weld with two pieces of metal butt to butt. And even though I've sanded this down, there's still a couple areas where it's a little bit proud, so that's what we're gonna be doing. We're gonna be sanding that down. And the tool I found that works the best for this is a grinder with a flap disc attachment. So not the typical grinding stone. The typical grinding stone is very crude, I find. This is just basically sandpaper, and it's a lot more forgiving. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take this, we're gonna hit it everywhere we can go, and then we're gonna show you the other tool we're gonna be using for hitting the areas where this won't reach. But this is what we wanna start with for sure. All right, all of our welds are broken down now. That went pretty well. Once we finished with the grinder, we actually ended up grabbing this guy. The air belt sander works really well. The only thing about this thing is the belts really wear down quick. Sometimes I get a minute, sometimes more. I think this is like 40 grit, so the highest grit I can get. Works well in the most tough to reach areas, and it's a great tool, but without a good compressor, it doesn't go very long. So for me, it was a really slow process. So the grinder definitely is the better way to go. But it did a good job, and anytime I'm doing the spot welds here on the sides, that's the tool you use. You can't get the grinder most areas, so just those two tools are enough to get this job done, which is really cool. All right, so that's done now. We're ready to move on, but before I do that, there's two things I want to talk about. So doing a job like this, you got to give yourself as many advantages as you can get, you know? Just doing the job in general is already so miserable as is. Like if you're giving yourself the pain of being under here and doing all that, you're in a world of hurt because it's brutal work down here. But one of the biggest things is vision, being able to see. I know that sounds kind of stupid, but it's true. So the biggest thing I've been doing is, I had a lot of problem with the goggles fogging up and stuff, so that's why I use the full mask. Using the full mask really helps, just being able to see, plus at the same time not worried about anything, you know, going on my eyeballs again, which has happened before. So that's good. But the second thing is light. So a while ago in another chapter of this, I had shown this. This is a light I bought. And I was kind of complaining, oh, it didn't come with batteries, and I really wanted it plugged in and stuff. To be honest with you, I am so happy with this thing because not plugging it in, having it on the battery, it'll last a couple hours. So I bought 2 batteries and that lasts me all day. So it's actually really nice. You know, the other lights I was using my movie lights. They were catching on fire and stuff. After about the 3rd fire, I said, okay, I need to think of something else. So this has been really good. Probably the most useful thing I've had here. The only thing about these things is sometimes I feel like the people who create these things either A, aren't mechanics and don't do this stuff, or B, don't even test them. Because the first problem I had was this thing. It's super slippery, so when I put it in here, it would just slide down. It wouldn't stay up. So I wrapped it up with electrical tape, and now it stays. So that's one thing. Another thing is, it's so easy to just knock it over. It takes nothing at all. Like the base here sucks. So I'm gonna put probably like an extension for the legs so it doesn't knock over. It's so funny. You use these things for like 5 minutes, and then you find out the flaws within 5 minutes. So it makes me wonder why people put this kind of stuff out in the store without really putting it to the test. So I'm a little skeptical there. Oh, and one more thing. I really don't want any rust in the areas I'm going to be putting it on. So I'm just going to take my wire brush, go all around the car one more time just to be safe, to make sure there's nothing there. All right, so with everything shaved down and ready to go, the next stage is they start getting ready for paint. But the one thing we usually do is we take some lacquer thinner and go over all the surface, just because the OSFO is very acidic, so you have to knock down the acidity. And normally I would do that right now, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do things a little bit differently. I also have to scuff up the entire bottom of this. Before doing any sort of painting, I really want to go over it with the 120 grit, which is what I got right here. I'm actually going to scuff it up first, then do the lacquer thinner, then I do a wax and grease remover. And the reason I'm doing it that way is just to have the bottom as clean as humanly possible. When I was doing the top, I was using fiberglass filler. And the fiberglass filler goes directly to metal. However, for the bottom here, I'm not actually going to be using fiberglass filler. I'm going to be using regular filler because it's really just more or less aesthetic. There's no water going to be sitting on the bottom here. There's going to be water contact, obviously, but nothing would be sitting in water, so I don't need it to be fiberglass. And in terms of structural, it's already very structural. I can't see much happening here, even though there's deflection if you were to stand inside it. You know, the welds are pretty strong. I use fiberglass on the inside, so I think regular filler on the bottom is good enough. So I will do that, but you can't do that until you've put epoxy on, because epoxy stops any sort of rusting. So it's generally said, if you're using fiberglass, bare metal. If you're doing regular filler, do the epoxy first, then do the filler. So we're kind of doing it backwards. Now, mind you, we're not even going to be putting the filler on anytime soon. All we're trying to do is seal this thing for the winter so it doesn't keep rusting, because if I just leave it like this, even with the OSFO, it's going to rust again. And since it's going to be a while before I do my finishing touches on this, I just want to seal the thing. So the goal is epoxy, seam sealer, epoxy again, and then just leave it. All right, folks, so this is it. This is it for real. I'm going to grab my Eastwood epoxy primer, mix it up. I'm using an electric gun, and we'll see how it goes. I'm pretty nervous.
Alright guys, so I'm doing the same system as our painting the inside of the car, because I'm doing both. If you want to see how I did that, check it out. Basically what I did was I take our epoxy, measure it out. It was all thick, so I'm scooping it out. I got my catalyst here. Let's see. I've been going 1-to-1 ratio, so 500, 500. We'll do 500 here. Okay, that's good. I don't quite... Yeah, now I do. By scraping the can out there, I'm really close to it. Pour it in. This one's ever so slightly less than 500, so I'll put like 450-ish. I know this is a little less than professional, but it's really hard to film this while doing this at a quick pace. You gotta keep moving. I'm really mixing the hell out of this because I don't want to take any chances. And then I just put this in my lacquer thinner. Take our gun. So we're using our electric gun. We used this in our previous video of doing the inside of the car. In reality, I'm doing both in one day because it's a messy job. Okay, take it. Gonna spray it on something just to make sure it works. There we go.
All right, bottom of the car is all painted, and it looks pretty good. Not gonna lie, it turned out a lot better than I thought. You know, if people didn't know any better, I think people are gonna start thinking I know what the hell I'm doing here. I gotta be careful. I gotta start making some more mistakes or something. No, but seriously, it's really good. I'm really pleased with it. Yeah, it turned out real good. So next stage is we're gonna be putting some seam sealer on. I spent the time going underneath and just painting any areas I may have missed. Mind you, it's not completely done. The front clip is remaining on for now. We will be touching it up. There's still work that's going to be done on the bottom of this thing, putting in frame connectors and whatnot, so I don't have to finish it. The whole point is to seal it. Spend all this time, you know, sanding this car. I don't want any rust forming, so we had to get some paint on. So that was the main thing. So we could move on to the next stage. But in the meantime, now that we have the paint, we coated it twice. So there are 2 coats on there. You can, the idea of all this stuff, I was told, was you can paint it, then you could seam seal and paint it again. I wanted to do that, but when I was painting the whole car, the weather was nice and everything was going so well, I just waited until it was enough time and did the second coat. So I'm just gonna seam seal and then I'll just hit it with a little epoxy later on in those areas. I don't have to paint the whole car again. It was just, I was on a roll, so I did it. It was just more of a workflow thing. So for underneath the car, we've used all these products before on the inside, but now for the bottom of the car, we'll be using the same thing as well. So we'll be using mostly the 3M seam sealer, and this is the applicator, so we've been using that. Works really well. This sets fast for high water areas. Then the brushable is really good as well, and we still got this guy if we need it too. And then the cheap stuff we need it, but I don't think I'm gonna be using that for this because the whole bottom is a pretty high water area. I really want to do a good job. So we're gonna be sealing stuff, so let's just get started. 3M stuff, look, just use this inside. So you put it in, and essentially it's a special applicator, right? And it mixes it for you. It's pretty cool. Just a different type of caulking gun. And I'm doing all the seams that were done factory plus a couple extras. So in some areas I'll do extra, but the main one here to do is this one here. And then on the inside, the floor pans and all that. So I'll just start going. But this is where you just gotta move fast. I did tape on the inside. I was putting tape on both sides so I can make it flush. It's honestly not even necessary. I'm just gonna do it like this because I was able to make it look decent without the tape. So let's see, here it comes. Okay, it's mixing. It's mixing. Here it comes. Okay. This is just to stop the weather, right? Keep everything out. And kind of slopping it on here because I had done some welding repairs. And then I'm just kind of like drywall. I have gloves on. You would never want to do this with bare hands. Trying to keep it as thin as possible. That was a little thicker than I wanted. All right, all the seam sealer is on. It's pitch black outside right now because it's been a long day. It's been going for a long time. But I know that you only have a certain amount of time before you can't paint over primer anymore. If you don't scuff it up, you can't, after 5 days, you can't recoat it. So that's why we're going so hard. There is seam sealer between the outer and inner wheel houses. I put seam sealer all the places it was before where the belts go. Also put seam sealer between all the different pieces of metal. Wherever they pinch weld, just fill those right up. That was really time consuming, doing the whole bottom of the car here, the whole inside here where the quarter panel meets the outer wheel house. Man, it's a lot of work. I even did one in the back because I didn't want the water going into the back of the trunk because that area wasn't seam sealed before, but there's really no reason for water to be getting in there. So I just did that, and all in all, everything's good. I really like the 3M, but what was really good was the tube. I'll actually get it right here. This stuff right here. Okay, I actually end up using this a lot. So this stuff was it was given to me by Serge from GTP Racing on the Quebec side. So they're Eastwood dealer. So he sent that. I also used the brush on. The brush on did really well on the inside of the trunk drop off here. So really all three were good. The 3M is the best, but it's really expensive at like 120 bucks a tube. Oh my God, it's a lot of money, but it's good stuff. But yeah, this stuff here, this is good. All of it's really good. I'm really I'm impressed with the Eastwood stuff and the 3M. So now what I'm just gonna do, I'm just gonna paint it all, and we'll see what the car looks like all finished. Fantastic, that looks great. I gotta tell you guys, I'm really happy with how this turned out. You know, having never done this before and doing this all for the first time, I look at this and I think it's something to be proud of. It's not perfect, it still needs some work. I still have to go back and do some body work on there. I could put some filler, there's a couple holes I missed here and there, and I can make it look better than it is. But I gotta tell you, overall, it looks great. Because we're hand sanding this thing, I didn't want to spend another 6 months in the winter waiting for summer to come so I could spray it again. So that's why we got it in on the last moment, just before it got too cold. So that was worth the risk, I think. This is really cool. You know, I added more seam sealer than I needed to, and I'm actually gonna probably add a little more later on. So I'm gonna be doing my filler, my touch-ups. I'm gonna make this thing as perfect as it can be. And I could even just brush it in some areas. Honestly, there's still gonna be another coat and all this stuff. So you can make it look as good as you like. It's really up to you, but you know, this is awesome. A couple things I want to talk about. First of all, the sprayer. That sprayer worked phenomenally. You know, I cannot believe how well it worked. My buddy Pat told me about it. Having the 2 batteries and being able to hot swap it, to paint the entire bottom and the top, it only took 2 batteries, not even full 2 batteries. So I didn't even have to charge it during the shooting of it. So I did my coats, and then I put one on to charge after the first coat, came back, was able to shoot it with, so 3 batteries total for 2 coats, which is pretty crazy. So overall, that's good. You don't need a crazy expensive sprayer. For the outside of the car, that might be a different story. I'm not really sure yet, but in terms of underneath there, not having the compressor, not having the hose underneath and whatnot, it was awesome. That was the best part of it. So I think these 20-volt electric sprayers have come a long way, so definitely worth getting. That was awesome. Now in terms of the paint itself, I'm actually really surprised of how the finish is, because we've been using these spray bomb epoxy primers by SprayMax, and they're really good. When they go on, their texture, it's almost like it's been sanded. Like it's really rough, you know? So you wouldn't even really need to sand it to spray on it, and I know that now. This stuff is not like that at all. It's super smooth. So the Eastwood epoxy primer is a lot smoother. I didn't expect the consistency to be so different. Both are super durable in terms of what I know. The SprayMax stuff, which is cheap stuff, it's lasted really well. Ever I did it, I was dinging it up, and it did a great job. But you can't spray bomb the whole bottom of a car. You really need a sprayer. It took us almost 5 quarts in order to do the bottom of the car and the inside, which is a lot, probably more than we should have done. Now, mind you, I put it on pretty thick in some areas. It was a little drippy in some areas, but I really wanted to coat the bottom and the inside because I don't want rust coming back there. The outside's gonna be a different story. It's gonna be a lot thinner. So that was kind of the way we did it. In terms of the seam sealers, obviously the 3M was the best. It did a really good job sealing all those things, but you gotta move really fast, and it does get quite messy. What I really liked was the caulking tube by Eastwood. I was really surprised of how well that worked on. So being able to put in those hard to reach areas, and I've been playing around with it just to see like the consistency. It is so strong. The brushable stuff is super strong, and the one in the caulking is too. I was actually surprised. I thought it'd be much crappier just because it's not a two-part, you know, like the epoxy, but for areas like between the panels, which is the hardest point to do, I kind of had to just jam some back in because I spent so much time removing it. Anywhere there's vapor, you don't want vapor coming back in. The biggest problem with these cars is the way they rust from the inside out. So what I did is when I had two pieces of metal sandwiched together and you got your spot welds, okay, on one side we painted it, we sealed it, everything, but where the joint ends, it's still open a little bit. So you got air coming in and moisture, and that's just gonna keep rotting. So I took the time of epoxy spraying as much as I could and then jamming it packed. If it is completely sealed on the top and bottom, it shouldn't rust. So it should last hopefully forever. With the frame rails, I actually might go back and add more seam sealer on the top of the frame rails, because as long as they're open, there's little holes here, little breather holes. And on the bottom, the water can still drain, should it get in there, and the moisture. However, on the top, I think I might be able to seal those. So you can really seal this pretty tight. And there still are a couple places in the car I gotta do, like near where the gas tank is, there's one area I could still see rust. So when it comes time to finish this thing, what we're gonna be doing is we're still gonna be taking our internal frame coating, we're gonna be doing some more internal frame coating and mist some airs, some more seam sealer, and then just touching it up with primer. And then we're gonna be putting on the filler, more primer, and then we're ready to go for painting, but that's later on. For now, this is done. It's time to start moving on to some other projects. So we're gonna be kind of leaving the main shell. All right, the car is covered up. It's time to move on to the next stage. And when it comes to rusty junk, we are just scratching the surface, my friends. If you look behind me here, it's really easy to forget just the condition of this vehicle. If you look at some of the stuff, pretty damn rusty if you ask me. The fenders look absolutely horrible. I'm not even sure if they could be saved at this point. A lot of rust. I did some repairs on one already. It still needs a lot more work. Inner fenders look really rough as well, really beat up, and we'll see what happens. The cowl vent is super rusty. And we got a mystery container there of all the different stuff I've been working on. I got the trunk lid sitting over there, which is really rusty. And then even in worse shape is the hood over here. Man, that hood is looking rough. So here's what I'm thinking for the next little while. I have no idea if I could save the fenders, the hood, or the trunk. But what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna attempt to save this stuff, because if I have to, get rid of it, I can just buy a new one. But at the same time, I think it's worth giving it a shot. Now, when it comes to the hood specifically, I was gonna get rid of that and take just a cowl induction hood with a 2-inch lift. I thought that would look pretty nice. And then I just started seeing a lot of them around. You go around and you see it here, you see it there, then it's like, everybody's kind of got the same hood. So as I'm working on this, I think it's cool to save the metal, but at the same time, I like to be different. I think you gotta dare to be different. What's gonna make your car stand out? The hood is one of the biggest things. So what I'm thinking with the hood is if I could save that thing, I think I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna cut it apart. I wanna do a custom scoop that nobody else has. Do something crazy. I'm not sure yet. I kind of got this crazy idea in my mind. Give it kind of like a 70s look, but not give it that really, primitive look. Make it look a little different. I'm not sure yet. I think we're gonna do something crazy with that thing. If it works out, then hey, we got a hood, right? If it doesn't, we just buy a new one. But at the same time, I think it'd be pretty neat. And the more I think about it, the more I like the idea of doing something crazy. So I think that's what we're gonna do. We'll see what happens, but you're gonna have to follow along. We got lots of stuff going on here. I think the next thing I'm gonna do is tackle that trunk lid over there. It looks in a little bit better shape than the hood, but it still looks pretty rough. Gotta see if we can save this thing. See you guys next time.